What happens when a
From now
respected
on,
Christian
you'll be
leader
fishers
publicly
of
draws a
people.
hard line and challenges one of America's most influential megachurches by name? Critics fired up, and the wider faith
Something
community asking
ears have not
uncomfortable
heard.
questions. Was this a prophetic warning, a personal rebuke, or a long overdue call for accountability? Tonight, we're breaking down exactly what was said, why it matters, and why this moment could mark a turning point no one at NewBirth can afford to ignore. Now, if you've been following church news and online ministry conversations lately, you already know that moments like this don't happen in a vacuum. Dr. Earl Carter is not known for reckless statements or clout-chasing commentary. When he speaks, especially publicly and directly about another major church, people listen. That's why his recent remarks aimed at NewBirth Church have struck such a nerve. In this video, we're going to carefully unpack what Dr. Carter actually said, the context behind his strong words, and why so many believers see this as more than just criticism. We'll also explore NewBirth Church's history, its influence, and the unresolved controversies that make this confrontation feel explosive. Stick with me, because by the end of this breakdown, you'll understand the deeper issues at play, the facts behind the tension, and why this moment could reshape how accountability and megachurch culture is discussed going forward. To understand why these comments landed so hard, we first need to understand who Dr. Earl Carter is and why his words matter in the first place. Dr. Carter isn't a social media influencer looking for viral clips, and he isn't a fringe voice shouting from the sidelines. He is a seasoned pastor, theologian, and church leader with decades of experience in ministry, church governance, and spiritual leadership. Over the years, he has built a reputation for being measured, principled, and deeply rooted in biblical accountability rather than emotional reactions. What makes this moment especially significant is that Dr. Carter has historically avoided public rebukes unless he believed the issue rose to a serious spiritual or ethical level. In past sermons and teachings, he has repeatedly emphasized handling conflict with wisdom, structure, and biblical order. So when he chose to address NewBirth Church openly, many observers immediately sensed that this was not a casual disagreement, but something he felt compelled to confront. NewBirth Church itself is no small institution. As one of the most recognizable megachurches in the United States, it commands a massive following, a powerful media presence, and significant influence within modern Black church culture. With influence comes responsibility, and with responsibility comes scrutiny. Dr. Carter's message tapped directly into that reality, challenging not just leadership decisions, but spiritual direction and accountability structures within the church. Here's where the tension begins to rise. According to those present and clips now circulating online, Dr. Carter framed his comments not as an attack, but as a warning. He spoke about the danger of churches becoming brands, platforms, or personality-driven institutions rather than places governed by humility, repentance, and truth. While he did not initially name specific individuals, the implications were clear enough that listeners immediately connected his words to ongoing conversations surrounding NewBirth. And this is where the first major cliffhanger emerges, because if Dr. Carter's concern was simply theological, that would be one thing. But as his message continued, it became increasingly clear that his warning was tied to patterns, not just principles. Patterns that many believe have been ignored for far too long. In the next section, we'll look closely at NewBirth Church's recent history and the controversies that made Dr. Carter's warning feel less like theory and more like a direct response to real events. To fully grasp why Dr. Earl Carter's words hit such a sensitive nerve, we have to step back and look at NewBirth Church itself. NewBirth is not just another local congregation. It has long been considered a spiritual powerhouse, known for massive attendance, national visibility, celebrity connections, and a reach that extends far beyond its physical location. For years, it has shaped conversations around worship culture, leadership style, and modern ministry in the Black church space. But with that level of influence comes a spotlight that never truly turns off. Over time, NewBirth has faced moments that tested public trust and internal credibility. These moments were widely discussed across Christian media, social platforms, and church circles, often raising the same underlying questions again and again. How does leadership handle accountability? How transparent is the decision-making process? And what happens when concerns from members and observers are left unanswered? What makes this even more complex is that NewBirth has also experienced seasons of rebuilding and rebranding, leadership transitions, public statements about renewal, and commitments to moving forward have all been part of the church's recent narrative. For many supporters, these efforts represented growth and healing. For critics, they felt incomplete, rushed, or lacking true accountability. This divide created a quiet tension long before Dr. Carter ever spoke a word. According to people familiar with Dr. Carter's teachings, this tension is exactly what he was addressing. His concern wasn't rooted in gossip or personal grievances. It was centered on what happens when a church grows so large that correction becomes difficult and voices of concern are interpreted as attacks instead of warnings. In his remarks, he emphasized that spiritual authority does not cancel spiritual responsibility. In fact, the higher the platform, the higher the standard. This is where his message begins to feel uncomfortable for some listeners. Dr. Carter referenced patterns of silence, moments when serious issues were acknowledged but not fully addressed, and the danger of moving forward without true reflection. He framed these patterns as spiritual red flags, not public relations problems. That distinction matters because it shifts the conversation from image management to spiritual health. And here comes the second cliffhanger, because once Dr. Carter laid out this broader context, he didn't stop there. His tone sharpened, his language became more direct, and he began drawing a clear line between leadership that welcomes correction and leadership that resists it. That shift left many wondering, was he speaking in general terms, or was he responding to something specific behind the scenes? In the next section, we'll break down the exact statements that triggered widespread reaction and why some believe Dr. Carter was sending a message that went far beyond NewBirth Church alone. This is the moment where everything shifted from quiet concern to public debate. When clips of Dr. Earl Carter's message began circulating, it wasn't just the fact that he addressed NewBirth Church that caused a reaction. It was how he said it. His language was firm, deliberate, and impossible to dismiss as casual commentary. He spoke with the tone of someone issuing a warning, not seeking applause. According to multiple accounts from those who heard the full message, Dr. Carter emphasized that the modern church is facing a crisis of credibility. He warned that when churches prioritize growth, branding, and influence over repentance, correction, and integrity, they risk losing their spiritual authority, even if their buildings remain full. This statement alone sent shockwaves through online discussions because many listeners felt it described situations they had quietly questioned for years. What intensified the reaction was his focus on accountability. Dr. Carter made it clear that accountability is not optional, even for large and influential churches. He challenged the idea that size or popularity somehow insulates leadership from correction. In his words, correction is not rebellion, and questions are not attacks. That framing resonated deeply with members who have felt unheard, not just at NewBirth, but across megachurch culture as a whole. At no point did Dr. Carter resort to name-calling or sensational accusations. Instead, he spoke in patterns and principles, which made the message more powerful. He referenced situations where churches move forward quickly without fully addressing past wounds, creating cycles where the same issues resurface again and again. To many listeners, this sounded less like theory and more like lived experience. And this is where speculation began to grow. Social media users started dissecting his words line by line, asking whether he was responding to internal conversations, private warnings that went ignored, or broader trends he's witnessed over decades in ministry. While Dr. Carter didn't publicly confirm any behind-the-scenes exchanges, his clarity of his message suggested that these concerns were not hypothetical. The emotional weight of his delivery also mattered. Observers noted moments where his tone shifted from teaching to urgency. He spoke about the danger of confusing loyalty with silence and faithfulness with compliance. That distinction hit a nerve, especially among church members who have struggled with whether speaking up makes them disloyal or spiritually out of order. And this leads us directly into the third cliffhanger, because once those clips spread, the focus quickly moved away from what Dr. Carter said and toward how NewBirth Church would respond. Would leadership acknowledge the concerns? Would there be clarification, dialogue, or silence? And